Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of What I Drew This Week. My name is Ray. I'm a self-taught artist that's been drawing for the last 6 months. In this episode, we will cover week 1 of dynamic sketching over at New Masters Academy, as well as a continuation of How to Draw Cats by Joe Weatherly, and finally, we'll be starting off a new course on human anatomy by the great Blaise. If you stick around to the end of the video, you will also find a bonus section with my personal sketches and drawings for the week. Timestamps are below. Alright guys, this week I'll start off by showing you dynamic sketching, the class on New Masters Academy by Charles Hu. Many people know this class from Peter Han, and he teaches this class on his own website as well as the Art Center. But the problem with those courses are that they're very expensive. So a cheap way to take this is the New Masters Academy by Charles Hu. So the first exercise they teach you is doing lines and then arcs. So basically line quality. Looking at this, you're drawing a line across and going over it 6 or 8 times to make the lines consistent and flow. So one of the things that you want to avoid is, stopping and going. They don't want you to do this. A lot of beginners are very hesitant with their lines. They don't go like this. This is better than this, even though this has a kink in it, because you have that smooth motion, and in your sketches, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that smooth motion to make the drawings flow better. And after lines, we do arcs. So this is the little arcs, medium and long. And for these exercises, originally I did them to size 100 here. So this is really going across the page. I think in my personal opinion, the longer you can draw across, the more of an advantage you have to work in large mediums as well as small sketches. If you can draw a very long line that is consistent, that means you can draw small lines as well. And after the arcs, we have waves. So small, medium, and long waves. And just start off with something like this, and then just go over it multiple different times like that to get your consistency down. And really your goal is to make these lines stack on top of each other, and so that you can't really tell that there was like 8 lines on top of them. I'm still getting there. It takes a lot of practice, so just be patient guys and just practice over and over again. And next I want to show you the exercises he taught me for doing circles and ellipses. So on a blank piece of paper, or if you're doing digital, this is the concept app, and you can divide up the page. And on the left here, we do circles, and on the right, we have ellipses. So going on the circle, there are many different ways to draw circles. What I know from Peter Han, the teacher of dynamic sketching, is to draw like lines on a page, and then just try to fit circles in between the lines like this. But the teaching here is to ghost in the motion and just try to draw circles freehand. And I think this is really more accurate to what you would be doing in the field, because when you're drawing out there in real life, you're not going to be breaking out rulers or drawing out lines. You're just going to be trying to freehand it. So what he recommends is to basically do the motion of the circle, and then once you're ready, go in it a couple of times. Now that's a terrible circle, but also because I'm a beginner, and that's why my circles are a little bit lacking. But that's the idea. You try to fill a page full of circles, and that's an exercise you can do. And next we have ellipses, same idea. So basically the circle is like perfectly round, and ellipses is anything else that is not perfectly round like that. And typically you encounter these when you're drawing wheels in real life, or just looking at something that's round but from the side, and you'll get this ellipsis effect. So you can see, for all these, I ghosted them in, and once I'm ready, I drew. So I'll do a demo. See, that's terrible, but I need a lot of practice. And finally, we have this other ellipse exercise. And these are called control ellipses. And you start from a line here and a straight line here, and then draw these green lines. And these represents the planes to put the ellipses in. And after that, you just fill in the ellipses. So the idea is that these ellipses are going in different planes. You see this one is kind of flat and these ones curve up. And for all of them, you're going back to the origin line like this. And you just ghost it in and draw, ghost it in and draw, ghost it in and draw. All the way until you get back to your origin. And you shouldn't really be erasing these. Just do what you can. This course, the instructors will stress that you should really be doing this in pen and not trying to erase too much. And really the perfection will come from doing these exercises over and over again, and not just, sitting here and correcting it a lot. That's not where the practice comes from. So just do a lot of practice like this to get the ellipses down, and this is what I need to do myself as well. And then next we have drawing boxes in perspective. All right, now that I have some training in the 1-point perspective, I can explain to you how to draw these boxes in the correct perspective. So on a page, you draw like a horizon line like this, and then you select a vanishing point. You can choose it in the middle, but it's more ideal to put it slightly offset. And then you draw like, let's just say like a box off to the side. And then I will take 1 point on the edge of the box and trace it back to the vanishing point like so. And don't worry if you don't get this perfect, because the more you do it, the better it will get, the easier it will get, and the more accurate it will be. So getting it perfect the first time is not really the point. Okay, and then now I know that this is how the perspective would be. I will fill in those lines and then we'll make out the box. And basically for all these other boxes, that's how I did it. So all of these are tracing back for the central vanishing point, and then I'm just framing it around those lines. And when you're doing the bottom, you see that, oh, now there's also this other line from this angle that I can trace back to the vanishing point, and you just fill up that box. And that's how you get these boxes that are correct in perspective, and that will be more important as these lessons go on. And yet another exercise is to draw rhythmic boxes. So you start with a gesture line like so, and then following that gesture line, you take like a marker or just a pen and you go along with the gesture line to fill in the boxes. And then you try to just get the flow going. And yes, and that's how you do that exercise. And then here, my note to myself is to use the top of the boxes to guide the movement. So you notice how in all these boxes, I have this top plane here. And that's how you keep track of things, and you make it move. So if I make all the tops invisible, then I know that this is the way that the boxes are going, and I know what I'm looking at. So that makes it easier to understand. And the line is the most important element here. So going according to the flow of the line is what you should be paying attention to. And I think this is, finally, we have the arrow drawing exercise. And you just start with like a 2D arrow. So think of it as 2D going to 3D. 2D, this is 2D arrow, and then you try to twist it. And then you just try to make it flow. You try to make it flow, you extend it, try to make the arrow drop. And you try to make it follow like a certain dropping pattern here. And the teacher, they say that, pay attention to these edges, because when you have these edges, it makes the silhouette more clear. and you can understand the drawing better. So when it comes to silhouette, just think about what if you just only saw the outer outlines of an object? Is that outline going to be clear and communicate what that shape is about? Or is it that if I just have the silhouette, the shape doesn't really come through? So the stronger you make the silhouette, the easier it is for the viewer to interpret what they're seeing. And that's what he's talking about here. And then here, work on twisting these arrows right here. And those are exercises you can work on, and this is just to make it even more 3D. Stretch it out a little bit, understand these shapes going through space. And that, my friends, is dynamic sketching week 1. So then we have a continuation of Joe Weatherly Guide to Drawing Cats. And for this week, I've been working on constructing cats from basic shapes. And we talked about the general pipeline of drawing cats in the construction method. So first, you start with the gesture. What is a gesture? Great question. So gesture is just the line through whatever you're drawing. So you see this cat here, and let me get a different color. So if you see this cat, there is actually a gesture line going right through the cat like so. And by following this gesture line and constructing the shapes on top of it, that's how we make our cats look more alive, not just stiff. So you start with a gesture, then you construct, breaking into basic shapes. What kind of basic shapes do you see on the cat? So I can see the circle here, and then I can see like this type of shape, and then maybe like some sort of cylinder for the legs, another cylinder for the tail here. And you just keep breaking the cat into these different volumes. Maybe some sort of break it down to some type of shape like this for the torso. And that's what artists mean by constructing it, breaking it down. What kind of basic shapes are you seeing? And try to focus on that. And next, we add the muscles we know on top of it, as well as the skeleton. So then, maybe from this shape, we know maybe the muscles go like this. You just flesh things out, add muscles, add body, that kind of thing. And finally, we're gonna add tone and color onto these drawings. So with these, with the master studies I've done from the book, you don't see a lot of tone and color, but that's not really the emphasis. The emphasis in the book is just to draw these gesture shapes very well and understand the skeletal muscles and that. But by tone, you mean like that kind of, maybe this type of stuff when you're shading in the top of the nose or like this. But this should really come in last, the shading. A lot of people make the mistake of going straight into shading, even though the shapes are not solid yet, the proportion aren't right, and we should avoid doing that because that should really come in last. Think of it as maybe the topping instead of the main food that you're eating. And this is a more clear example right here. You see how the neck becomes a box, and then these are more cylinders, and we have a 3D volume for the body itself. And then that's how you understand you're not just copying the outlines of the cat, but you're really understanding the 3D shapes of a cat. And next, you went into the basic shapes. I won't spend too long on these, but you know, like square, circle, triangle, and other rectangles and trapezoids. And these are what you're trying to fit into your drawings. And then we go from that to basic forms. We have a box, a sphere, a cone, egg, cylinder. And then with this, we turn it into 3D shapes. So you take a flat rectangle and you raise it, you add another third dimension to it, then you make it 3-dimensional. And then you make things have volume, right? And then here we have another section of the ellipses. And you take something that's perfectly square like this, you draw a circle in the middle of it, and then you put the plane down, and then you draw that in perspective. Oh, look, all of a sudden you have ellipse, and the front here will have more area than the back. And that's how you understand how, and then taking this plane and going back to the vanishing point is how you understand how to draw these ellipses in perspective. And this is an exercise. So as these cylinders are kind of flipping away from us, you can see the changes in the planes. You go from here, which is like a perfect circle, to here, which is like, you can see very little. And in fact, if we kept going with this, eventually we're gonna get here, which is like a flat line with a cylinder. And that's type of exercises that you need to do to get your mind to seeing these 3D shapes and seeing how these ellipses will turn in space. And then also here we have the freehand ellipses with gesture line. So draw a gesture line like so, and then just try to put ellipses. Oh my God, that was terrible. So draw ellipses on top of them like this. And just to make it look right in your mind, because you know what a right ellipse looks like, and with the practice, you'll be able to get it. And then you think about like any sort of limb, like an arm or a leg. It's all about like overlapping ellipses going up and down. So that's a practice that you should do. And here he makes a point about ellipses the ends of the ellipses like so should always be rounded and not like this. All right, it shouldn't be pointed. No pointiness. That's not right. And then, we're talking about ellipses should be symmetrical, where rounded ends that relate to eye level. And next, we're gonna do, we went into studying cross contour lines. So if you look at just the outline of the tiger and no contour lines in the middle, there is not gonna be that volume. So to give it the volume that these animals have in real life, then that's where we add in the cross contour lines, right? You put in lines like this, and then all of a sudden, you can see the nuances in the body, and it just automatically give it some type of shape here. And that's why cross contours are extremely important when it comes to drawing. And here, just exercises to practice your cross contour, and then building these shapes up from like a 2D axis, and then you put in the 3D by drawing the circle, and then we're gonna do the middle line and then going across like this. All right, so there are other examples in this book, but I think this is a crucial point to take a look at. So going from the 1D axis, we're talking about the X and Y axis here, and that gives it like the basic structure. So this is the 2D axis, and to make it 3D, we're gonna be putting in the ellipses, basically, in my opinion. So like this. That's the type of stuff that makes it 3D. And finally, the surface direction. So where is this pointing to? So this middle line is going towards downwards and to the side. And that is the final dimension that makes something take a 3D form. And yes, you think about the 2D line. So this is the 2D dimension. This stems from the bones and the skeleton. And then you add in those shapes, the volume, you turn it into 3D. And finally, this is not a good example to show the midline and how that adds to the sense of direction, because you can't see it when the animal is off to the side like this. But we know that it's pointing this way, and the direction will also add to the sense of the form. So that was the end of the Joe Weatherly How to Draw Cats guide. Next, we're going to be going on to Aaron Blaise's The Human Anatomy course. Aaron Blaise, he's very famous for drawing animals out here on YouTube, and he has his own website called The Creature Art Teacher. I highly recommend his material. I decided to learn human anatomy from him because I like the way he teaches, and I also like that the course is concise and condensed. So I did week 1 of that class to try to get some basic idea of how to draw the human skeleton. So looking at that, we just try to break down the skeleton into the pelvis and then the legs and the feet, and just trying to get a rough idea of the basic proportions and stuff, and going into the tilt of the pelvis. And he made it a point that this is the male pelvis. Notice how this is more flat. And then the female, it's tilted more forward, and this part becomes like this. And it causes the bottom to lift up more. And that's why anatomically, this is the explanation for why the behinds of males and females looks different. And that's something to keep in mind when you're drawing human anatomy. And we did the back here, we did the shoulder blades, and just a basic understanding of how certain muscles like the trapezius attaches to the shoulder blade and how that moves around. And then the last thing I did from him is the head proportions. So I've been doing various head proportions, but it's really the same, very similar. So we have the bridge of the nose and the eye line, and make sure the bridge of the nose is above the eye line. So that's a mistake that he said that many people makes. So a lot of people make it the same as the eye line, but in reality, the bridge of the nose is typically just a little bit higher than the eye line. So that's something to keep in mind. All right, so that was all the teaching materials that I did. So I want to go on to the bonus section, which are my personal sketches. And you can see where all of these teachings have led up to. All right, and this is my digital sketches. Apologies in advance, I didn't do a lot of them. This week was kind of busy for me. But you can see that for these figures, I basically didn't even use a reference. I try to just have a gesture line going through these, and then building what I know about the anatomy on top of it, which is not a lot. So then, this is why it's all a work in progress. It's not perfect. It's probably the worst one I did this week. But I wanted to show you guys just the imperfections too, and not everything is going to be perfect as a beginner. So you get the courage to just start and practice on your own as well. And these two are my kids' toys. As a dad, I spend a lot of time with my 2-year-old baby, and sometimes during the downtimes, I find a toy or two and I try to sketch it in perspective. And that's how I try to keep my skills sharp, even though I might not be taking a class or drawing a lot. Just little things here and there do add up. All right, so that was all the digital work that I've done this week. Let's go on to my traditional sketches. So for this week's traditional drawings, I actually don't have a lot to show. I only have 3 drawings, which was not a lot. But I have the golden eagle, and this was live from the zoo, as well as the lioness laying down. I like how both of these turned out, but I like the eagle especially. Just something about birds. Drawing birds makes me happy, so I will keep drawing more. And then this is just a quick sketch of my toddler. But really it was just a gesture of her, and then the rest I had to build on top of it or just imagine, because as soon as I put down that line, she was no longer in that position. And yeah, this is kind of messy, but What can you do? It's just a part of the learning process. Alright guys, so that was all that I drew this week. If you want to follow my journey, consider subscribing to my channel. See you guys next week.